It's time for our weekly best decks roundup for Marvel Snap. Let's go ahead and dive right into the deck list I've been enjoying playing the most, as well as what the metrics on Untapped tell us is dominating for everybody else. Let's get to it. We kick off my Jeff's picks this week with my favorite Kahhori deck. While her total power level overall, I say, isn't on the higher side, she slots really well into a deck like this one. This has long been one of my favorite things to play in Marvel Snap. It's got a super low to the ground curve, giving you lots of choices on how you're going to sequence in those first few turns of the game, but all of your card generation, Snow Guard, Mirage, Kate Bishop, Frigga, Moon Girl, etc. also keep your hand full, so you have lots of choices of what you want to do in the late turns as well. I think one of the biggest shining points that Kahhori and this deck in general have is that you don't eat it to one individual tech card in a lot of your games. You're typically spreading your stats out in a lot of kind of medium-sized things so you don't get exposed to Shang-Chi. While you have some ongoing stuff with Victoria, Hand, and Quinjet, it's fairly free to spread that across the lane. So if you're going to get tagged by an Enchantress, it's only going to get some, not all of your bonus. And then for this particular deck list in general, I really love being able to include both Snow Guard and Quake because their location variance mitigation really makes this type of deck low variance to play, because there's games that other decks would be auto losing to bad beats on the location flip ups that this one can turn into instant wins with Quake, or simply smooth over completely with Snow Guard's Hawk, turning things off at opportune timings. I played this deck quite a bit on my live streams this week, so I'll link some gameplay to it in the video description down below for those that are interested in checking it out that haven't had the chance to yet. My next Jeff's pick is my preferred flavor of good cards, tech stuff mush in our current metagame. There are a ton of variations of this style of thing running around, where you've got stuff like Sam, Iron Patriot, and Kate Bishop as generically good twos, and then in this deck list I have Luke Cage, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and Shang-Chi as ways to kind of kick over whatever my opponent has going on. We mix this in with generically good cards at other spots in the stat line, like Galacta and Rocket and Groot, and you end up with a pretty consistent mix of cards that has a chance in just about every game that you're playing. One of the upsides to these good stuff mush piles is that they're pretty friendly to higher series card substitutions. Wiccan's kind of the important one here, giving you extra energy to get big swings on those final turns of the game. But any of the 2 energy cards, Rocket and Groot, Galacta, Speed, those can be substituted out for other things at the same energy cost, so long as you're keeping curve considerations in mind so you can hit your Wiccan bonus consistently. Moving into our high potential category, we have deck lists that have really promising stats on Untapped, albeit in smaller sample sizes. They could be the next breakout thing, but they could also level out a little bit as more people pick them up and play them. We kick this off with this Pixie Gore variation that is almost going to be on my Jeff's pick this week until I was combing through Untapped and found it in the metrics there as well. This has kind of been one of my comfort decks in Marvel Snap since Agent Venom was released. In a way, it's kind of like a mom we have Mr. Negative at home, where Pixie shuffles the cost on big cards like Iron Man and Gore, and then Agent Venom adds power to them. But the upside of this deck compared to something like Mr. Negative is in the games where you don't get the cards that improve things in your deck, you can still play a pretty reasonable game plan thanks to Magic and Bass kicking things up in stat lines. This deck list really loves the Adam Warlock rework as well. You're able to bast him in tandem with other cards like Hood's Demon that get points early on the board, so he can help you draw through your deck, seeing even more of those Agent Venom and Pixie cards before the game is over. As far as higher series cards go, I would say Agent Venom, Gore, and Pixie are obviously all very important to the core of what this deck has going on. Sage, you could sub out for something like a Wolfsbane, and Nico Minaru is just a pretty generically good 1 energy card to give you low cost things to shuffle with Pixie, so she could be something like an Iceman, so long as it works well with Bass and Agent Venom. Our next high potential deck list is a pretty interesting Ajax variation that's leveraging a small Miles Morales package. Rocket and Groot kind of ties the room together, being a card that inflicts penalties for Ajax, but also a move enabler for Miles. As a second way to get Miles discount is playing Sam Wilson as a generically good card. Honestly, the 3 card package of Rocket and Groot, Sam Wilson, and Miles feels like something I would like to explore in a variety of other places in deck building in Marvel Snap. These are just 3 generically pretty solid cards that happen to have synergies with things like Ajax that I think you could play in a lot of spots. The Ajax deck in general has consistently had pretty good metrics in Marvel Snap since it released. It does require some pretty specifically narrow cards, though. Stuff like Red Guardian, Cassandra Nova, Man Thing, and even Silver Sable are unfortunately not very replaceable in this deck list since they're unique in the afflicts that they're causing, which I think is one of the reasons why Ajax stuff hasn't been overly popular overall. Next up, we have a new take on an old favorite of mine, the Angela, Kitty, Elsa Hope package being paired with Hitmonkey and Bishop. Bishop got a small buff in our most recent OTA, and this deck list core had been pretty reasonable in Marvel Snap eras past. I will say one kind of interesting decision in this particular deck list is that it's electing to play Killmonger as its tech card of choice. I suppose the upside of that is it has a lower curve, so you can enable things like Elsa and Hope sooner, but I'd be curious to know if anybody at home has played this. Let me know in the comments down below why you think Killmonger might be better than some of the other 3 energy tech cards like, say, Mobius or Luke Cage. This deck list does have some pretty strict higher series cards requirement. You need both Elsa and Hope for your power level to chug along, but I would say things like Hydra Bob, Kate Bishop, and Sam Wilson are more just generically good cards in this deck that you could sub out for other reasonable 1 and 2 energy things. Stuff like Nightcrawler or Jeff the Baby Landshark could be reasonable, for example, with it just being important that you keep your curve similar so that way you can be enabling Elsa Bloodstone consistently. Once upon a time, this particular monstrosity held the title of most played deck in Marvel Snap while having an absolutely abysmal win rate, and it definitely made me raise an eyebrow when I was combing through the untapped data this week and saw that it not only had a good cube rate, but it also had an over 50% win rate with hundreds of games logged on the tracker. This deck list is basically the Russian roulette version of blinking one of your 3s into a powerful 6 or better. Hitting something like a Destroyer or a Galactus could often win the game on the spot when you roll into it. So if you're someone that likes a little bit of gambling that's going to have reasonable cube equity, this deck list could be a fun choice right now. Another card to get a buff in our most recent over-the-air update was Red Wing. It's up to a 5th point of power while still pulling a random card from your hand into play at its previous location after it moves. This take on Red Wing is a really interesting direction to move with the card. Instead of trying to cheat in absolutely massive things like an Infidot or another 6-drop, it's simply using it as a tool to get an extra 3 energy card into play at the end of the game in the Surfer deck. I would imagine under ideal circumstances, you're kind of setting up a scenario where you vomit out the entirety of your hand except for Silver Surfer on that last turn of the game, and then you move Red Wing, allowing you to drop that into play and get +2 to everything that you have on your board. Because you're playing move enablers, Anya, Madam Web, and Doctor Strange for Red Wing anyways, this deck list also gets to play Vulture, which is a pretty good statted 3 energy card. With even a single move, it kicks up to 9 points of power, which is pretty solidly above rate for a typical 3-drop. The non-movement higher series cards in this deck are definitely not core. Sage, Copycat, and Red Guardian can all be swapped out for other generically good 3 energy cards or tech cards that you're interested in playing should any of those be missing from your Marvel Snap collection. It was inevitable that we'd come back around to a Marvel Snap metagame where the top performing decks would be some variation of Thanos. The Mad Titan has received a number of touch-ups in recent weeks, and this deck list is his best performing per stats on Untapped right now. I don't think it's an accident that this deck list past the Thanos buffs also got a pretty solid upgrade with the addition of Goliath to these Spectrum cores. This archetype gets a way to spread stats pretty efficiently across the board, and then your final turn of the game can threaten either Spectrum being a wide board buff or Thanos adding a giant pile of stats into a singular location. If you're missing higher series cards in this deck, make sure your swap outs end up staying similar on curve so you can be enabling Wiccan, and then make sure they're ongoing effects as well so Spectrum's buffing them up at the end of the game. Behind the Spectrum Thanos, our other top performer per numbers on Untapped for a number of the data slices is just sign a Thanos generically good stuff deck. We have good 2 energy cards at the bottom end of the curve. We've got Red Guardian and Shang-Chi mixed in with Alioth and Blobs at the top end of the curve to finish the game out in a few different ways. This deck list can both make solid numbers of its own, as well as kicking over and disrupting whatever your opponent might have going on. Negative Wong remains at the top of the charts on Untapped for average cubes gained for another week. Just one of the best ways to put absolutely massive numbers into play, often while dodging tech cards, because if you play well, you can throw priority going into that last turn of the game. It is worth noting that this deck list actually has a sub 50% win rate on the Untapped tracker, despite having one of the best cube rates on there, because it's not super consistent, but the games that it's winning lots of cubes because people absolutely hate retreating after their opponent plays Mr. Negative and then draws up half their deck with Jane Foster, the Mighty Thor. Finally, the most popular deck on the Untapped tracker for most higher ranked slices and one of the top performings in those stats as well is this Lady Deathstrike Movers Amalgamation. If you thought your opponent kicking your cards around the board with Spider-Man and Polaris wasn't frustrating enough, this deck list kicks the interaction up to an 11, blowing your cards up with Killmonger, Lady Deathstrike, playing Shang-Chi in addition to Cannonball, and then mixing in a little copy of Red Guardian as well for good effect. This deck list has really potent synergies that scale thanks to Scream, Craven, and Sam Wilson all getting bigger after you play them on 2, and it also makes sure that your opponent essentially doesn't get to play a game of Marvel Snap regardless of what they're doing, because there's one or more cards in this deck waiting to kick their sandcastle over. If you're looking to climb in Marvel Snap right now in the most efficiently brutal manner possible, I cannot recommend this deck list enough. It is incredibly powerful and incredibly rude. Thanks for making it through to the end of the video. If you enjoyed my roundup this week, be sure to smash that like button. As always, I would love to hear what Marvel Snap decks you've been playing in the comments down below that have felt fun and are sweet for you, so I can consider playing them on my live stream. If you happen to be new here and you enjoy roundups like this one, you can expect one every week, so subscribe to the channel and come back again sometime. I appreciate everybody for watching, and I hope your snapping is excellent today.